just want to say, first of all, it's great to see the people who have been coming to the panels that I started just 2 days ago. And this is a high point for me. One meets great people in life at different stages in life. And I still remember the first time I met Leonardo Drew. I had known his work, but I didn't know him. And he and I share a best friend whose name is Richard Shabiro. And I was blown away when I met him. I loved the work so much, and you're going to all be so, if you don't know his work, this is the greatest present I could give you. And if you do know his work and you don't know him, this is the greatest present I could give you. Not only Leonardo makes breathtaking art that is so powerful and it's visually breathtaking, but also it tells a very important story. But his being is a piece of art in itself. And that's why I wanted to start these 4 artists with him. The other artists I admire greatly too, but there's only one Leonardo Drew. I've learned so much from him as a human being, as an artist. I want to show you all his work quickly. And then I want to go back and start asking him questions, because the truth is Leonardo could talk about one thing for the whole hour, but I'm going to keep him moving. Leonardo, did you study with Jack Whitten too or not? I don't remember that.
No, he's my teacher at Cooper Union. Right.
So Jack Whitten was another one of my best friends as well. And if he was still alive, he'd be one of the 4 as well. And I taught together with Jack for 15 years at the School of Visual Arts on the same floor. And he knew how to spot great artists. And I know he admired Leonardo's work deeply. And there's an early image of him that I thought of Jack, because you're walking up with the cotton, but we'll get into that later. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions. If you want to ask questions, put it into the chat. So let's start off with the PowerPoint. We're going to go very quickly. So I really want to start with that beautiful image of Leonardo, and it'll say a few basic facts about him. Let's keep going. That's him. So you can see here, he's a contemporary artist based in Brooklyn. He creates sculptures from natural materials, and through the processes of oxidation, burning, and decay, he transfers these massive sculptures. Well, you can look at it. You know what? I don't even want to say anymore. So let's go to Leonardo as a young man, because I love this image. I've seen this so often. And Leonardo's going to talk about himself as that young guy, and as all of us love.
With hair.
What?
With hair. Yeah. Okay.
With hair, right. With hair. And he's next to a superhero, which I think he later becomes. So I think it's so interesting to see I think that's a self-portrait, to be honest, but I'm not going to get into that. But this is one of his early works of art. Let's go to the next. We're going to go through this quickly. This is from '88, and this is around the time that I start seeing Leonardo's work. And it's very profound by what it's made out of. It's very profound of how it hangs on a wall. The color changes and all these things. You're going to watch how over 40 years the work really changes but doesn't change, and that's what I love. You see, it's Leonardo's work, but it keeps changing. Let's go to the next. We're going to go through them quickly just so that you realize how much great work he's done. This is one of my favorite images. Leonardo, I'm going to let you talk for a minute. Tell them a little about this, because this is so great.
Not staged. It's authentic. Me pushing a bale of cotton down Broadway, of all things, 1991. I couldn't drive a car. Was using Jack Whitten's studio to build a huge cotton wall. So I was walking like 30 blocks from, an upholstery store on 26th Street to where Jack
studio was at Lisbonard Street. Wasn't
exactly.
His studio on Lisbonard?
Yeah, right. It was like 30 blocks. So yeah, pushing. I had that in me back then. I couldn't do it now, but pushing a bale of cotton down Broadway for 30 blocks. Yeah, it does build the muscle. So it's. And I was doing that. Like maybe like 3 times a week. And someone caught on and decided to do this photo shoot based on my pushing this bale of cotton down. I mean, he saw the political ramifications of this image, and I didn't. You know, I would like to have actually been smart enough to say, really have to set up a photographer to have this this black man pushing a bale of cotton, you know, pretty much, I mean, in rags. You know, it's my studio outfit, you know, for making things. So in effect, it's like it just fit right into the narrative. And this is 1991, so really ahead of its time in terms of political art. But definitely a bale of cotton being pushed down, you know, by a black man down Broadway. And like I said, for me, it was just necessity. I couldn't drive a car. So it was like, okay, how do I get from A to B? It was like, okay, put it on the dolly, push it down the street, you know, 30 blocks. So all makes sense to me. Even now, still does. You know?
So it's so interesting because next week we're going to see Meryl Euclides, and during those periods she was doing touch sanitation and doing performances like that. And next week, all of you watching today, you're going to see an image. And I don't think you knew did you know her those years or not, Meryl?
No, I mean, like as far as like who was doing what, I mean, definitely, like I said, you know, as far as like how we're realizing ourselves as artists. Now there's a huge push towards, you know, like identifying absolutely, you know, who you are sexually, you know, spiritually and otherwise. It's like all these things are like issues now, and it's coming with clarity in the arts. You know, I was just on a on a voyage of discovery, so I can't really say that I was tuned into what was, you know, political ramifications for, you know, being a black man doing what I was doing. You know, it was, you know, I did it all, like I said, out of an absolute necessity to make. And to this day, I still have that. And we can talk more about that later as we go, you know, into some of the, I guess, other images.
Right,
but
right.
This one actually is definitely a politically charged image. You know, do we have the image of the cotton wall, the end result?
Yes, we do. We do. I just am doing this for a minute because I just love the image. Let's go to the next. There it is.
That's the cotton wall. So it's like, yeah. And I'll tell you that I was with a girl from like in '98. This piece was created in '92, but we were traveling in '98 from from Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia to Tallahassee, Florida. And there's these cotton fields. And within the cotton fields, it's like there's this machine pumping out these cubes that look exactly like that, you know? And I was like, you know, I could have done it the easy way, you know, but I had to do it, like, you know, cutting all this material, you know, like it was the manual labor involved in this. I'm still feeling the pains of it. So it was over the top ridiculous. And it was a machine that actually could have pumped. I mean, the machine the cubes were identical to this. I didn't even know that was how you would, you know, condense and process, you know, cotton. But this is you know, like this through osmosis, I was creating this monstrosity and like and this monster cotton wall. As I was sort of driven to do it. Makes perfect sense, like I said now, but then it was this, you know, out of absolute necessity, it had to be made.
Well, it's so interesting you bring that up. We're going to keep looking, but that's one of the things that I find so fascinating. This is a piece, and I have to be honest, I'm lucky enough to own a small piece of Leonardo's from this period. This was at the Metropolitan Museum, and every time I went by the Met and saw it when it was first installed, there's something so beautiful about the wallness of it and the livingness of it, and the fact that it looks like you did nothing. And I want to talk about how hard you work to make your work look like it just appeared. And
I mean, you mean becoming the weather? Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever separated myself from natural processes. So I think that we as collectively as human beings, we do that. We like to believe that we're superior to Mother Nature, but in fact we are, and fall right in line with the processes. I mean, we're born, it's a birth, life, death, and regeneration, you know? So we're part of that very same cycle. So we're not separate from, you know, from nature in that respect. And I think that once we sort of get that in our heads, that actually we are nature, We are the nature of nature, and we're not separate or superior. It's like, so me feeling like, creating things through natural processes, it's just falling in line with like becoming the weather. I'm not separate, so
Right.
like it's easy for me to sort of like realize these works because I have not necessarily severed that line,
Well, didn't you make these in smaller sections and then you put them all together? We're going to
Oh
see that
yeah,
later.
you can't get these things. I mean, I was living in Washington Heights and working out of my apartment, which had like 2 rooms, and I was sleeping in a bathtub because all of the rooms were about like making art. So all the materials or everything was sort of piled into like one room, and then I was sort of like, create in the other. And actually, a friend came by and said, "How are you going to get that out of here?" And I haven't never thought about getting anything out of the studio. I was thinking more about just creating the things. And it makes sense that you need to sort of be able to break these things up so that, in increments that, one, I could actually manage. I could live without having a whole army of people, helping me sort of like put these things together. And each one of these was just on beams,
Right.
that I could get up and down, it was fitted so they can go down the winding stairs of the apartment tenement that I lived in, and also to get through the doors. So I resolved this whole idea of, how to make large scale things, in my tiny apartment, just out of happenstance. It was just like a friend actually mentioning, that you're never going to be able to get this thing out of here. And it's like, now I make things like this, and they all.
But we're going to see that later. We're going to get to that later. I want to go back. How big is this piece? Somebody asked, and I would guess it's like, how tall is that? 12 feet high by 30?
It's big, tiny. For me, it was like, it's probably about like 10 feet tall and 24 feet long. I don't know what that is in meters and centimeters, but
yeah,
like,
but that's what I thought. Yeah, it's a beautiful, it's a great piece. All right, let's go to the next one. The next piece to me is a fascinating story, and I'd like you to talk for a minute. What does it feel like to be commissioned to do something in a space?
Oh boy, but this is in Siena. And you're up against, I mean, look at that ceiling. I mean, that tells you everything about like, okay, you need to meet this in some way. That actually, there should be a dialogue, with space. I mean, I think a lot of artists would like you to believe that they have not only a command of space, but they don't allow the space to sort of like dictate how they make things. I will tell you, absolutely, I allow the space to dictate where, how, and to realize work. Like when I was in Washington Heights, for instance, my ceiling height was like 10 feet. So that work that we just saw, it met that ceiling height. Now my ceiling height is 30 feet. So guess what? So yes, indeed, space does dictate, So I mean, like, I can't help but make big things because my space now actually has a ceiling height of 30 feet. And then realizing that now I have to make this piece for this museum in Siena with these fantastic frescoes and other ancient works of art, like staring me down. It was like, okay, you need to sort of meet them, and that's what happened here. So this piece definitely, like, has a correlation or dialogue with the actual space. And I like to believe that I met it, but I would leave that up to you guys. Individuals, but
no, I think you did. I think it was amazing. Another thing you do that I find fascinating is that you repurpose some of your work, and we'll see that later. And I think that is so interesting that your works are part of. Yeah,
nothing is sacred in the studio. That's for sure.
Right. Let's go to the next one. So this piece I adore, and tell them a little about how you did this project with Merce Cunningham.
Well, I got this call from this guy, and he was like going on about he liked to actually meditate in front of the piece that we saw previously that was at the Met.
At the Met,
that was one of his favorite pieces, and he loved meditating in front of it, and was wondering if I would be interested in working with him. And he said it was Merce Cunningham. And I said, give me a second. I have to make some phone calls, because I didn't actually know who he was, And of course, like, after only like one phone call, really was like, oh, you absolutely have to do this. It's an honor. And it was, because his way of realizing, his productions is like he allows the artist to come in and do whatever. whatever. And he's going to accept that as a part of the performance. The musician also, he gives that very same license. And so, I make this monstrosity sort of like, and opening night, all these elements came together. And so the three elements, meaning his phrasing, my making of the art, and the musician's music, and this is a continued formula throughout his whole career, is like how he actually elevated was actually always meeting those challenges. And I asked him, what if it fails? And he just accepted that. And once I got a hold of that, how he was realizing, his masterpieces, I said, I have to incorporate that in how I realize my work. So between people like Merce Cunningham, Stanley Kubrick, filmmakers who have, or tourists who have a way of elevating the art form, I think that between someone like Merce, and how he realizes things, and how I can sort of navigate that and actually have it become a part of my language. This is what it's all about. I mean, it was a blessing to work with him. Absolute blessing.
Did you feel that the work changed by the dancers in front of it? And did you, how did you feel about that interaction? Because I always think about other set designs in with theater or with dance, but this piece was so integrated. That's really what I loved about it, is that it didn't feel, it felt like you both were talking to each other. It wasn't like there were two separate dialogues.
Well, there was his belief and just that, and his philosophy that made that happen. Because if he would have said, I want you to come in and do a set design, guess what? I would have actually needed to sort of talk to his dancers, work within his parameters in terms of what the stage, the composition of all this is, how all these things have to sort of come together. None of that happened. There was no dialogue after he asked me to come in and do whatever, and I did whatever. So that being said, he's allowing the art to sort of take hold and become. And I think that's actually the most important thing. Like in the studio, that's how it happens. Right. The art kind of pulls you by the nose. It takes you to other places that you could never have actually imagined. And so he's allowing that by allowing you to sort of let you off the leash, so to speak. There were no parameters. There was no guidelines, none, zero.
What happened to the piece after the performances?
I think the Wexner owns it now, along with Merce's archives. I mean, so they that became a part of the, it traveled in places. I've never been to Korea, and that piece has been there, and a number of other places around the world. And I've seen it at least 3 different situations. Each time just as fantastic. I think that it just hats off to Merce for his philosophy and how he sort of guides, I guess the guides art. I mean, it's like it was unbelievable, unbelievable experience.
I think it's very interesting because I think about Elena Tsui, who does his major hanging pieces, and I once talked to him about, do you tell the museum or do you tell the gallery how to hang it? And he said, no, I made the work. Let them do some work. So I think it's very interesting to hear. So when it went up in Korea, you weren't there to hang it. They hung it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always about letting the art be. And also when installing in different situations, just to give you, for instance, when I was in London a few months ago, we're doing an install there, and the art handlers who have to do the installing, I always kind of feel like it's up to the artists to sort of like bring them in, to allow them to sort of feel like they are participating in something, because from that you will get the most out of them. Yeah. And I think that was another lesson learned from Merce, was that there is a level of allowance and trust, and what Natsui was saying also is that, he has enough faith in the elements that he's, all the things that he's put into that work, spiritually and otherwise, that will, the work, you can't do too much to actually transform this into something that is not, It is, And so this piece, whenever it travels around, or whenever it did travel around, it just became whatever it needed to be, because it is,
I agree. It looks like a U, but it looks like a U with movement. Let's go to the next one. So this piece I wanted in the, I pushed for this in here. So I admire the way you work. I love the way your mind works. So I want you to tell our wonderful audience, who are very fine people, tell them how this work came into being, because I find this riveting, and about the way you give information and you tell a story. And we're going to see other works of yours later, but I want you to talk about this for like a minute.
Well, this is just like a family tree, so to speak. I mean, the elements in it, you can actually see even previous works that we just saw at the very top. That looks a lot like the piece that was at the Met. The other one, the one in Siena, is right below it. So I think that, yeah, they're just, all these different things that I touched on at that time, types of works that became this piece. And like I was saying, nothing is sacred in the studio. So all these elements of previous works are either in the studio, ready to be sort of like reused. It doesn't really matter. If you bought that piece and you left it in the studio, it's definitely gonna get taken apart. So don't ever don't ever leave anything in the studio that I won't store it for you. It will be used. And so this piece is actually just made up of previous works, elements from other works, and for me, it's there's like a layering that goes into like something like the Grand Canyon, for instance. There's all this language that comes from just having something, having lived. And so there's these layer or strata of information that's undeniable. So the more times I touch these things, the more powerful they become. So it's always better to sort of work or dismantle things that actually had a previous life to allow them to actually go into something new, bigger and refreshing, and actually, encompass actually far more than its previous life. It's like a reincarnation.
Yes, I somebody just asked a question that I'm going to answer, and that's why I wanted you to show this. And I love that you said that, because that's one of my questions for later. Is I believe, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not upset at all if you are, do correct me. The reason I love this piece so much is I feel like I'm mining your brain. It's like mining and seeing what really interests you. And I love that you brought up that the top pieces like from the Met, and somebody asked, are all your pieces this large? And we're going to see smaller pieces of yours later. But I think even your smaller in size pieces are still very large. I think when you look at it.
Let me interrupt 1 second, because you're going about small things. I can only tell you that it was not in me to sort of actually make small things. There were studio visits from friends and who come through, and they would see things on the floor, fallen works, parts, things that would fall off of works, and they would say, "Can I have that?" And of course, I just hand it over. And you see these things later in their homes, and they just go like, "Whoa!" You just didn't know that there was all that in that little, and I say, you know what, you can get away with actually making small works, because within these, it's like a microcosm of information within each one of these little sections, So yeah. So it was not my idea. It was not my ingenious idea to start making small things. It was actually through people who were visiting the studio, collecting elements off the floor. Yeah.
Right. But I think in this one, you feel that this is like opening your brain. That's what I felt when I saw this, and I'm going through all the images I wanted to show. I told your assistant, I really want this in here. Let's go to the next one. So I love this image. So tell them a little about this.
Oh, that's my 4 years of me back and forth to China, mainland China, place called Jingdezhen. I was working with these, I guess, I could call them artisans who, they have this craft of making these gigantic vases. They have the kilns. They actually, cook these 25 foot tall kilns to sort of cook these vases. So I planted myself there with them and started, trying to sort of like realize how I could add something new to my vocabulary. And the fact is, as I was smashing things that were coming out of the kiln, they were throwing them out, because they thought it was garbage. And I had to explain to them that this actually it's my work. I'm smashing these things because I need to do that. And sometime later, in a store in Shanghai, a friend, saw, some smashed porcelain works, and it wasn't my work. Just like, China's the Wild West. So the kind of things that I learned from them and the kind of things they were borrowing from me, it was a fair trade-off. But you will now start seeing smashed porcelain works all throughout parts of China, because of the my experimenting there with like smashing things. So like it was a fantastic trip. Color was added to my work because of my visit to China. So I'm finding the more I do traveling and the more I take in information from all these cradles of civilization, the more the work is brought to a whole other level. Things that I would not have considered if I was just central focus here in New York. I mean, I needed to sort of like move around and collect more information. Your body's like an antenna. Your body's an antenna. It's receiving information. No matter where you are, it's taking that information in.
It's funny. I originally had told you I want to show all these images in the beginning and then and stop slowly, but I like what we're doing now even more. So this is like, it's very funny because I told Sherelle twice. I know, because I like this, but I'm
never going to get through this. You know that, right? You're going to lose your audience.
No, I won't. We have a wonderful audience and they're all still here. Thank you. They're a great audience. But I want to ask you another question. I love the way your mind works. And you said something very interesting, that everyone's mind is an antenna and you learn from everywhere you are. Can you tell them a bit about what your day is like? You get up in the morning, what you do. And they're going to see pictures of you in your studio. But I think it's very important because, Rich and I talk to each other all the time and he'll say, oh, Leonardo was here or Leonardo went there. You travel quite a bit, and I think that enhances your work. And you just said that's what brought color in there, and we're going to see some of the later images. Talk a little about your antenna. Tell everyone a little about, do you know when the idea is going to come? Yeah.
No, you don't just take in information through your eyes. Your body, through your pores, you're taking information all the time. I mean, even our discussion right now will, in some way, I'm sure, will influence some sort of action that I will take in the future. So I think that we're all taking in this information. I think that we have to sort of own the fact that that's happening. It's, for me, it's a life philosophy. It's not an art philosophy that you actually can and will take in and become all things around you and about you. And as an artist, that actually is super important because it's information that is endless. It's like, I would not say that my work per se is about a specific thing, if it's political or otherwise. I would say that's, for me, that's not, it does not compute. Life is happening around you. And you need to sort of if you're an artist anyway, you need to be able to share that information. You need to be able to take it out, take your body out there, receive that information, and then, and allow it to come out. It's got to come out, like when I was in Dakar, Senegal, I went there for the first Dakar biennial, the very first one back in '93. And there I was in Gorée Island, where most of my ancestors, as slaves, had to go through these catacombs and chambers of being held captive and then put on ships from there and then shipped off to different parts of the world. There I was in these catacombs where where the journey would have started, and it was amazing, what was going into my body, but I didn't know how I was going to process any of that until much later. I created this monstrosity, we'll see it, I guess, number 43. And it's like, I only look at that piece and I say, I know exactly where that information, why this piece happened. I didn't create number 43 with that in mind. Keep that in mind, that when you see it, I was not thinking about catacombs and about you know, like an imprisonment, but that piece is absolutely about that. So that happened because I placed my body there, and that information had to come out.
Right.
And so that's just truism. That's a truism about like if you allow these things, these elements that sort of come in, you have to also allow them to come out. And that's the artist's duty, sort of continue to sort of you know, elevate and educate. You know, so you know, I'm just a conduit, really. So
I love that. I believe all of art is that way. Let's go to the next one, or at least every good artist. There we are.
Yeah.
So this piece,
color.
Yeah, the Hammer Museum. I think this piece is. I mean, I love all your work. You know that, and I'm very lucky that I live with one of your works. But what's so interesting about this one is it feels very different than the other ones, and I picked this to be in here also because it looks like the wall is pulsating. You know, it feels like you're moving, and I really find it fascinating that it's by a stairwell. And as you walk into it, you feel like you're entering, and as you walk up, you feel like you're leaving. Can you talk for a minute about the way you work on an installation like this? And we'll see you in the gallery later, but this is in a museum.
Well, I mean, the color, the action of the piece, the you know, the verb of it. I mean, this is new. My works, I mean, were usually gridded, and they were about feels. But the elements of action and color were not a part of like how I saw things. After realizing and taking in China for 4 years, I had no how you say, no choice but to sort of allow that.
No option, right?
And so like the glazing and the kind of alchemy that goes into creating these porcelain works in China, you know, I had to find a way into my language. And so in effect, I was adding to my vocabulary when I was there, and these color explosions were, you know, all of what my experiences were there, you know. So
I without giving away too much, can you tell the audience how you paint certain things and then cut it up? Can you give a little bit of about how this is being created? Because I find that fascinating.
Smash and attack, you know. It's like there's a total absolute disrespect for things that are crafted. Like when I said, when I was in China with those beautiful porcelain vases, it's like you know, I only saw that as material. Right. And of course, you know, the meticulous aspect of like how I make things, it's like if you allow that to be the art, then that's what it's going to be. But I will take something that I put a lot of man hours into, you know, with the idea that I am going to become the weather, and I'm actually going to, you know, rip it apart, you know, and just you know, it's you know, like I say, you know, you become like a force of nature. So you allow these things sort of like to occur, to happen, even if you've put in so many slave man hours into creating something. It's never going to be sacred. You know, you're going to really have to sort of take it through the processes of, or the natural process of, so it can become itself or find itself. You know, and this monstrosity, yeah.
That's what I wanted people to hear. That's really what I wanted people to hear. It's beautiful. Let's go to the next.
Yeah.
So I still remember this exhibition. And this is like controlled chaos. You know, I really like.
Yeah.
I wanted to show these two next to each other. What?
I said, even like musical notes. I think actually Richard, who was going on about, he felt music when he was looking at these works. I mean, they can be like hieroglyphics, you know, words in a language, you know, but they're also always elements from previous works that also come together to sort of form one thing, you know. This piece is absolutely that. So it's all these different elements from different periods, you know, but it does, in fact, feel a lot like jazz music or even classical, depending on, you know, the location.
Right. Can you do me a favor? I know this is not exactly what I was going to do, but when I look at this, I think of Mondrian, and I love what you did for Mondrian. Can you tell them a little about that? Because where your studio is? Because when I look at this, Rich and I talk about this, this looks to me like music. And I think about Mondrian and Broadway Boogie Woogie, and tell the audience, it's such a powerful story. It's only tell it in a minute and a half or so, but this is brilliant.
Well, it's just well, let's just let everyone know that Mondrian is actually buried here in Brooklyn, just actually a block away from me where I live. And a friend was visiting, and he suggested Paul Pack actually was visiting, and he says that he believes Mondrian must be buried somewhere in Brooklyn because it would seem that he never left. When he got here, he never left the States, and he never left Brooklyn. So we were just on a lark. It was like, okay, well, I'm surrounded by like 8 cemeteries. I said, let's go and check and see if he's buried here. Now it was kind of like I said, it was kind of like more like tongue in cheek. It was like a joke. And like we went, the very first one we went to, he was buried there. And not only was he buried there, that the folks there didn't know who he was. He was in the pauper, he's buried in the pauper section. And they have this huge book. And it just tells, like who, is buried in the cemetery. And we asked, is Piet Mondrian buried here? And they say, yes, he's buried here. It's in the pauper section. Is he a relative of yours, And we're like, yes.
I heard that story from Richard.
and they gave us this map. And it took us a while to find him, but there he was, buried among all these small stones. There's Piet Mondrian. And like there was an article that came out on how we found him, but like and now people are coming out. They bring mementos like paintbrushes and canvases and images of his work, and they leave it there at his stone. But and also at he's given a gold plaque because now he's a luminary there in the cemetery. But like before Paul and I found him, he was just there in the pauper section. Believe it or not, the great Mondrian.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. There's a video of you. If you want to see it, anyone, Google Pierre Mondrian and Leonardo Drew, and you'll see a video of Leonardo at the cemetery. But I wanted to bring it up. I didn't want to tell you about this, but when I look at this piece of yours, it looks like an explosion of jazz. I would love to see this piece next to that Mondrian piece, because it's dealing with music and note making in such a different way. But I think this piece almost feels like it's coming alive and moving. So very, very powerful. Let's go to the next one.
Great Mondrian. Blessing. Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy. I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind which pieces I picked. I had so much fun.
Well, you picking the right ones. That one's actually at the Tate right now. They're hanging out with Louis Nevelson.
I know. That's what. See, you took away my question. See, Leonardo, you and I know each other too well. You're going to know everything I ask. So talk about this, because I think this is so profound to have those two pieces next to each other, because her work is about being contained and yours is about exploding. So talk about that a little. And how does it feel to be at the Tate next to her? And what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, she was something else. I mean, just it's an honor to be in the ring with her, but it's an alive version of her work, and I think that's an understatement. But she definitely has influenced a lot of art out there, and I know I fall right in there. Along with, there are others, like there's Ava Hess, Cornelis. Kiefer. I'm not Sarah. All the artists that I admire. I'm just only adding to a language that's vast. I'm a part of it. So I mean, just like I said, it's an honor to be hanging next to one of them. So Louise Nevelson. Kudos. She's fantastic. A monster. Yeah.
Right. I want to ask you another question, because I look at your work and they look so much like Leonardo Drew. And I wonder if you were thinking about, you use the color black, which she does. She uses white, she uses gold. But I feel like your works have a lot to do with movement, and hers feel like they're and I love her work, by the way. She's a big influence on me, and I've been in exhibitions with her as well. But what fascinates me is now that you mentioned Richard Serra, it would be beautiful to see on one side of you a Richard Serra oil stick painting, on the other side the Louise Nevelson. But what fascinates me about this piece is in one not such a large piece, you have all different scales, and you have pieces that are cut down, and then you have pieces that are much more organic. And that fascinates me. And I also love the way it's attaching to the ground. And two sides are more rectangular and the other ones are more alive. Do you want to say anything about that? Or
it's an understanding of composition. I think if you were just to imagine that when I'm making these things, I'm actually drawing. I'm not sculpting.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm building a composition based on all the things that I've known all throughout. I mean, I started off as with my facility of the illustrators from Marvel and DC Comics. I mean, all these guys were coming at me when that was in the 70s to sort of like, work with them. And it was all about like my understanding about how to sort of like, bring a surface to life. So you keep that in mind as you're looking at all these works, these supposed sculptures, which actually, if you linger on them long enough, you'll realize they're actually more like drawings. And not so much that they're actual, they're on the wall. Most of them are wall based. Have you recognized that? So it's I'm actually taking on that, that canvas, that paper, that wall, and turning it into a composition. Look at this is probably the best one to sort of realize exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel it with that earlier drawing that I showed, because I knew I was going to show this later. And I think I love what you said, and I wouldn't have said it. Now I'm happy that you said it, because I'll use it the next time I talk about your work, that your sculptures are drawings. I find that I love that idea. Let's go to the next one. So this piece, I don't even know what to say. I love it so much. This is at your gallery, Lelong, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Talk about. I love seeing the broom on the side. But talk about that. I didn't even notice that was there. Oh, I did. It made me think of a Degas. I always think of the way, in fact, that Degas would do these dancers, and they would use a little something in the front, and it gave you a sense of space. That's right. Here it actually feels like you're building the piece, and you can see your tools on your side. I just think you're watching, and this is my gift to the entire community here that's watching this. You're watching an artist's brain at work, and I find this so compelling. So talk about that. I mean, somebody asked me, do you work this all out beforehand, or do you bring all your material here and then let it build itself?
There's no beforehand, and there's a reason for that. Mostly because I do feel that because of where I come from, previously, in terms of how I saw things and how I was making work, I allowed my facility to be the driving force. When I decided to say, tie my hands and say, okay, you're not going to be using your facility anymore. You have to find another way to create. That meant, like no more painting, no more drawing, no more sort of like mapping things out, so to speak. If it wasn't already sort of like going from your head to your hand and out, without this sort of like study, the sort of like, or a map to sort of give you an idea where you were going, I said I was not going to allow that to happen. So I just tied my hands and said, okay, figure out another way. And what came of that was, like I said, it was just these monstrosities. I mean, they were just coming out, and defining themselves in ways and with different materials, and then like I said, realizing that sculpture can be drawing, or that there are no barriers. I say once you start stripping away, all of these, devices for to conventionalize what you do. The all breaks are off. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. So it's like, if you confine yourself to sort of like working a certain way, then your end result will be sort of predictable from my perspective. Now,
No,
I
you're
admire a
right.
lot of
Yeah.
artists who come back, they do, this is what they do, they make this is my stamp, this is my signature, but life is just too short. I need to sort of get out there and I need to bear hug all of this, you know, and try to make sense of it, you know.
Well, it's very visible in your work, but the truth is, Leonardo, I know your work from a mile away because it has that energy, but it has that growth to it. Let's go to the next one.
But that's the same piece, a different angle. But it's
I
all
know,
about finding your voice. I mean, it's like you find your voice, and no matter what material you're working in, it's you. So from paper to porcelain to cotton to whatever the material becomes, you know, like I will find a way to sort of like, you know, it will become me, you know,
right,
or at least in the way that I see the world.
So your assistant, your wonderful person working with you, I didn't have people in there because I didn't know how you would feel about it. And she said, no, Leonardo loves it when kids and people react to the work. So talk about the way you perceive your work. We're going to get to see your outdoor installation at Madison Park. But I'm fascinated by watching this kid. I think of you as the young kid in the first image we showed. And that's why I wanted this kid in here, because you're creating artwork for the next generation. And I'm so curious how they're going to take this work and what they're going to do with it.
Well, it's a brave new world, man. I mean, with the internet and social media, I mean, how people are reading art now, it's amazing. I can't keep up. It's you know, I mean, like realizing, you know, like people needing to take what do you call them, shout out pictures or selfies in front of these things and do these weird things in front of the works. I think it's amazing, and it's a blessing that I'm able to sort of like say, wow, there's a, you know, not only are these people are reacting, but they're also, now you're finding disciples. I mean, I've lived long enough to actually have disciples of all things, you know, like kids who step to me and say, oh yes, you're my hero, my biggest influence. And I'm like, what? How is it, you know, how did this happen? You know what I mean? It's like I always thought that was making work in a vacuum. You make these things and it's like, okay, well, they make their way out in the world. But there's another realization that has to be considered, and that is that you guys are complicit in finishing these works. You know, I make them, but I can't finish them. You know, you guys, the people who actually have the opportunity to sort of take them in, you're complicit. You're finishing the works. You know, so you are part of it.
I love that you said that, because so you know that, Leonardo, because I tell you and I tell Richard all the time, I have so many SVA students at School of Visual Arts students. When we go to your shows, the next few weeks, I see so many Leonardo-ish. It's like when they would go to Rauschenberg shows, I had a teacher named George McNeil, and for my thesis show at Pratt, George came into the room, and what I loved about him as an educator, he didn't say anything to me, but he said, you know, I guess you really love the Rauschenberg show. And I didn't even know what he meant. And then he repeated it 3 times. And by the 3rd time, he said, you have 2 more weeks until the thesis show has to be done. Get back in there and make these works into Tobi Kahn. So I feel like I have so many Leonardo Drew students at SVA, and before the end of the semester, they become themselves. All right, let's go to the next one.
Oh,
so
always.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know. I love this piece. You know, it's so much fun doing this with you, Leonardo, because I get to curate. You know, your assistant made me put certain things in, but certain pieces, I love this piece. So why don't you talk to and I'm happy you showed the porcelain piece. So let them understand how you come around doing this. And for the person in the question who asked, what about the small pieces? And, you know, I want you to talk about this. I find this piece so intriguing.
I mean, it's a you know, work on paper, we call these. Literally, it's you know, my way of realizing what drawing can be. You know, like on a small scale. I mean, this is, you know, trying to sort of get all that energy onto a sheet of paper, and there's a lot of fun in that because the materials have changed such that almost anything could be sort of like realized on paper as a, you know, as a drawing, you know. And you know, this is a porcelain bits, and it's sort of cataloging all of the parts that I've used while I was in China, and sort of the kind of color palettes that I was using. But it's you know, this whole idea of you know, like that there are so many different iterations of you, and it's about as big as your imagination. So when it comes to sort of like from this scale to like this massive and in between, it's like, you know, like I said, all bets are off. It means anything's possible. So from changing materials to sort of like traveling to sort of like realizing how to sort of like take in or allow other information or new information to come in to sort of allow the work to sort of become what it needs to become. You know, so I'm finding more and more, you know, like you know, I'm just being pulled by the nose by the work. So right. I just I just try to get out of the way, but in effect, you know, you are actually being led by, you know.
How is the work attached? A few people have asked me that. And then there's another question about politics, which I know you're not going to want to do now, but we'll do that at the very end because I don't want to, I love the direction, but I see the question. But talk about how these are attached. That I think people would love to know.
Well, I'm like the poster boy for Golden's matte medium. And I just use that to, you know, like use it to glue down just about anything. I mean, it could be weathered, you know, like successfully, you know, weather things for like 3 months underwater, and it still just holds. You know, it's just great stuff. So you know, hats off to Golden's for the kind of materials that they make and the quality of materials. But like most of these things are being held on literally by, you know, by that you know, the gels that they make.
Right. I agree with you. And I'm a big fan of Golden's too, because they're archival as well. So you don't have to worry about the color changing. Let's go to the next one. So I love this image, and tell everyone what this piece is and what happens to this piece.
Well, I mean, like, I mean, there are a number of works in there actually, but the one that I'm seeing me playing with is like
that's the one I meant. Yeah.
I think that we're going to see that. That was a part of the Madison Square Park installation, where, you know, I mean, I had never done an outdoor piece before, and this is it was a challenge because in the beginning I had the idea that I was going to be doing this massive you know, piece that was going to be almost skyscraper size, you know, exploding tree monstrosity. And like, and everybody was, you know, like, yes, let's do this. And I was like, I came to my senses. I said, you know what? If I do something like this, you know, it's going to kill somebody, you know? So I had to completely rethink how I was going to approach, you know, like an outdoor sculpture framed by the city. I mean, we're talking the Flatiron Building, the Empire State Building, all these fantastic architectural structures surrounding that part. And it's like, now you're going to have to sort of meet that. My way of doing it was sort of like to say, you actually, the viewer, should become Gulliver, as in Gulliver Travels, and allow the artwork actually to be the smaller, on the small scale, and you as a human, you know, looking at this to be, you know, like to be Gulliver. And it actually resolved a number of problems. Obviously, the one of gravity, you know, just that very idea that you're going to make a rug rather than, you know, like a take on, which is what most people will do when they do outdoor works. They make, you know, things to sort of compete with the surroundings, and they want it to sort of be as tall as a tree or in some way sort of meet the skyscrapers, you know. So I just said, okay, we're going to go in reverse. So this became more about just like realizing a composition at ground level, you know. So kids were able to crawl over this thing and to play on it. People were able to sort of like do whatever on these pieces. And in effect, go back to what I was saying before about the viewer being complicit in finishing these works. They actually finished these works by actually adding their bodies.
Yeah, we're going to see that in a minute, but I want to stop on this image for a minute because this is one of the photographs that I most love, because what you just said is the trees become part of your piece. And I love the statement about that. I heard Henry Morse say that what makes a good sculpture, it's looking at it from every different vantage point, and you walk around it and it becomes something else. And I love what Giacometti said, it's not what I leave, it's what I take out. And both those sculptors, I think, are talking about your work. because this piece, when you see the trees behind it, it almost feels like it's an inside installation, that you feel like you're in a small area and they're jewels. I mean, I remember going there. I remember your beautiful hat that you were wearing at the opening. And it felt like you were in a gallery or in a space or in a controlled environment, and all the noise from the cars and the trucks, you gave kids and grownups. I was one of the people that climbed on there. You felt like you were in an oasis. And it was almost a magical world that you created. And I really loved that each of these towers were totally different, and that you had the little cities. I don't know if you remember, Leonardo, I did a piece for the 9/11 Museum where I did the whole floor of the city. I really, I did it in 2011. I love what you did with actually making the city heights all different. I made it very low. So can you talk about, did you worry about kids breaking it? How did you deal with that?
No, I mean, even though they put up signs saying don't climb, I was there to tell them, get up there, you know.
I saw.
I felt that it was absolute necessity that they involve their bodies in this work. I think the park needed to sort of like have those signs up just for lawsuits, you know. But from my perspective, it was all about, you know, they need to sort of involve themselves in this piece in order for the piece to complete itself. And I think that, do you have images of
yes, we do. The next one at kids. Go to the next one. The next one. I'm sorry. It's the one. There it is.
Oh, well, they had some people doing dance. What is that?
Yeah, they're doing performance. and then they're photographers
with all these images. So it's not like I know all of these, like what people were doing with these pieces. But I think that through social media, I think that these images could be collected. But I don't even have a website. You know, it's like I just allow the social media to sort of be out there to sort of give these kind of images. I think this is fantastic. I couldn't have choreographed that. You know,
well, it's back to Merce Cunningham.
Exactly.
But how do you title your work? Some people have asked me that, and some people today just now asked, how do you decide what to title your work?
They're not titled. There's no title. What title? They're all numbered.
That's what I meant. How do you decide on the number?
Well, the numbers are, it's just a way of cataloging. So, I mean, I think this piece was, I don't know the number of this piece. And actually for me, that's just not important. The idea is that these works should become like mirrors. So you should be able to like find yourself in them without having to go through me. If I gave you a title, that would give you a hint of what I might've been thinking about or whatever. And I don't think that's important. It's important that you're standing in front of it, and that you, in some way, by gravitational pull or some rules of attraction, that you find yourself in it. So it becomes a mirror, you know? So and in that way, I actually end up learning too. That means that when I step to you, when you're looking at one of these things and I ask you questions, you don't have to go through me in order to find out what this piece means, you know?
Right. That's great. All right, let's go to the next. This image is one of my favorite images.
I survived.
It looks unbelievable. I see people covering their mouth. I mean, you look like you're gonna drown in there.
Yeah, we call that island of sanity and a sea of chaos. You know, so it's just what it is. I mean, how I need to sort of make things. A lot of times, things are piling up on top of one another. And it looks like there's no rhyme or reason, but in the end, I know exactly where all my elements are on the floor, and I know where they belong. So it's all about attack, you know, when I'm in the studio.
It's so funny. Somebody just wrote, you look like a superhero. The superhero thing keeps coming up in your work. Do you have somebody photographing you there in the studio, or is that just?
Maki Kawakita, actually a photographer who shot early on back in '97, came to the studio and was here for like 3 months and just kind of blended in. And you'll find most of the photos are from her, because she became invisible in the studio, and she used it to sort of like she used me as a body to make her own body of work, so to speak. she's a well-known photographer now, but like then she was up and coming, you know, and she just used me as a, you know, as a what would I be, a tool?
No, you're the model. By the way, we have two. Richard gave my daughters 2 great pictures of you. I wonder if those were taken by her too. There's one of you looking at your. It was when she graduated college. It's you looking at a sculpture. It's a beautiful photograph of you.
Is that in here?
It's not in here. I didn't put it in. I love it. But can you give the name again of that photographer? Somebody asked.
Maki Kawakita. Yeah, out of Japan. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So now we can talk. This is the last, Shirel, this is the last image. Am I correct? Yes. So now we have 15 minutes just to talk and ask questions. So first of all, Leonardo, that was such a treat. Like, wow. I mean, unbelievable. You are, and I told you all, he's as good an artist, but he's also an amazing human being. Some people asked, which I don't like asking, but so many people have asked that I'm now going to ask.
Politics?
Yeah, I don't want to do it. And I know you don't like it.
Let's do it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, God, Leonardo. He is the greatest person. I want you all at the end to stop. 5 minutes before the end, you're going to have to clap for him because he's doing what you know. He works so hard, and I don't even know how to thank him. But I love that you're nice enough to do. Oh my God, Ariel HaKohen, one of the other artists we're going to see later, is on here now. A wonderful young artist, conceptual artist, photographer. That he loves your work too, Leonardo. This is so much fun. Anyway, so do a favor to humanity. This is not for me. This is for the group listening. Tell them a little about how you see the art world. I know what you think, and I agree. Before he says anything, I agree with everything he's going to say. It's not a conversation I love having either, but I'm doing it to be fair to the audience. Talk to them about what you think.
About which what?
About how do you see yourself as an artist politically? You know, what are you trying to get your viewers to understand about you?
About me, it's not that. That's actually the very point. That actually is. It's not so much about.
That's
me.
what I'm trying to get to. I agree with you, Leonardo. But I'm doing it to be. I'm doing it for them. So what do you want the viewer to experience? I know your answer, but they want to hear it from you, not from me. What do you want your viewer?
It's you know we're on a collective journey. Okay, we're on a collective journey. It's not one specific to. And I'm only talking from my perspective now. We can talk about, you know, when art is specifically about this. This is not that time. This is not what we're talking about right now. I'm just saying that we are all a part of a larger collective. We all have something to offer. And I think that when great art does happen, a lot of times it does actually reflect, and it becomes a mirror of our moment, time, about what we're going through, what we're specifically going through as individuals and collectively. So it does really depend on it should be dependent on the perspective of not necessarily the artist, but the person on the other end. You know, because if it's going to operate as a true mirror, a way of realizing ourselves, you know, there could be no right or wrong in that, you know, and the very fact that we are actually looking at, you know, a truth, you know. And I don't think truth is necessarily relative. Truth is actually an absolute. So when it comes to standing in front of something that's a mirror, and it's going to reveal a truth, you know, a truth about us collectively.
Who is some of your favorite artists? So many people have asked me to ask you that, so I'm asking it. So who do you look at and go like, oh my God, I love that work?
Oh boy, there are a number of artists. We already mentioned Sarah. Of course, Kiefer, Mark, my good friend Mark Bradford. Yeah, I mean, it's an endless list. But those are probably, I'd say, at the very top. Those that I just mentioned just now. Ava Hess is in there too. Nevelson. It's an endless list. It's like you name it. I'm not actually, when it comes to looking at art, I'm not that judgmental. I even look at graphic novels to see what the illustrators are doing. So it's about facility. It's about bringing always sort of an additive to a larger language, right? So you know, having my foot in both things, you know, as I was coming up as an illustrator, and then finding myself, you know, challenging that because I saw Jackson Pollock. It's like, you know, Jackson Pollock, you know, sort of changed everything for me. I mean, at the time, I mean, when DC and Marvel were trying to get me to sort of work with them, I had already seen Jackson Pollock. So that whole idea was doomed, you know, that there was no way I could work with them, you know? And I had to go to school and find out exactly how to get past that prettified surface. That means using your facility to sort of like, you know, to exact an end result, you know? And that's what illustration is. If you're now sort of like gonna look beyond that, you know, beyond your facility, that's what Jackson Pollock is, you know? So I found that once I realized his work, it was like all bets were off, man. And all bets were off. It was like, okay, you know, you can actually use this facility, this base facility, to sort of open a number of different levels and dimensions, you know? And I've been doing that ever since, you know? But all it took was just like, you know, saying that I'm not gonna use, you know, my facility, you know, all the things that I was really good at, and like, okay, and then figure out another way. So that says that the creative self actually is not necessarily these, it's actually here. It's all here. It's not this.
so correct.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm listening. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to know. Tell them about your week. Give them a week in Leonardo Drew's life. Like, what is it like? I mean, so many of them want to know.
Repetitive and exhausting. slave master rolled into one, you know. That's all I can tell you. But it's I'm not married. I've never been married, and I don't have kids, and I just turned 61. So that should give you an idea of what we're talking about. Commitment. I love women. I love kids. I never put the two elements together. I navigated. I don't know how it happened, but I managed to navigate, you know, around the conventions, you know. And so when I get up in the morning, there's no timer saying you need to sort of do this. I get my 4 hours, and I'm not bothering anybody by like hammering and beating on things at all times of the night. And getting up and getting on a plane and traveling to another country, I can do it at my discretion. So I can't say that I was smart enough or ingenious enough to sort of like plan out that if you're going to sort of commit on this level, that these are the things that you would need to sacrifice. It just kind of happened. It just kind of happened, you know, because I find as I get older, I say, boy, how did I get past those hurdles? The hurdles of convention, you know? And like, and all of my friends, they figured out a way to navigate all those things and still make great art. But I managed to sort of like be selfish and not allow any of those things to intervene, you know? So it's just this kind of like this ongoing stream of thought, you know, just kind of like ongoing, you know? So if I think about it, I just do it, and there's no consequences. No one else has to suffer the consequences of my actions, you know? Yeah.
All right. So I want to first of all say we have 5 minutes, and I want to just say, Shirelle, you pick out 1 or 2 questions, but before you get to those questions, I just want to say, Leonardo, in front of this wonderful audience, that I'm the scholar artist in residence. I can't tell you how honored I am that you said yes to do this. You know, anyone who knows me knows I think you're one of the greatest living artists. Not only is your art beautiful, but your soul is amazing. I feel honored to consider you a close friend. And I just am in awe of your modesty. That's the thing I like most about you. You're so not full of shit. I mean, you are so there. And when you say how much you're taking.
The man has said it.
All right.
Thank you, Tobi. Thank you.
Shirelle, to pick out a question or 2. I'm giving you permission because, Shirelle, you've been amazing too. So to pick out a question that you want Leonardo answer the last question.
Yeah, it's literally, first of all, Leonardo, thank you so, so much for this. It's literally the last question. So I'm going to go to, it's kind of a personal one, but someone asked about your name and growing up with that name and if your parents had an aspiration for you to be.
The truth of the matter is I grew up in the hood. And the name Leonardo is not one that would, like, no, you're going to get beat up. So I actually hated the name. And so from probably up until second grade, when my mother moved us to a Catholic school, and we're no longer a part of the public school system where I was getting beat up for my name. And and the nuns told me, they said that, do you know Leonardo da Vinci? And I was like, whoa, you mean there's another Leonardo, So that was how it actually came about, that I actually realized that, that this is a name of some import, So it's like, yeah, Leonardo da Vinci, yes. And then, my mother likes to take credit for naming, but she did not name me. It was my father who she threw out way before, but he was an artist. And his name was Leon. So it makes perfect sense that he would have named me Leonardo. I mean, what in my mother's, there's no way she could have named me. She likes to take credit, but she did not name. It was my father.
I heard that story from Richard, and I can't tell you how happy I would not have asked because I knew the answer. But Sherelle, I love that somebody asked it because now it's on tape. And
and my mother can beat me up for straightening out.
I know she won't. I know she won't. Wow. So wow. Thank you. Is there one other? We have 2 minutes, and I hate wasting a minute of Leonardo's time. Is there one other question? Yeah.
Well, actually, I think you covered most of the questions that were asked as we were going along, which is beautiful. So I do want to use this minute just to say thank you again to you, Tobi, for bringing us Leonardo, and Leonardo for sharing your time with us and your amazing art. Really, really stunning to see. And I just want to say to everyone, we have this crazy month with Tobi presenting for us. This week on Thursday, we're having the first session of the virtual gallery tours. And on Sunday, we have a panel discussion on Tobi's work at the Phillips Collection, and it's going to be live streamed. Leonardo, obviously, you're more than welcome to join and sit in for that too. And yeah, just thank you very, very much for sharing your art and your brain and mind with us. And Tobi, thank you.
Thank you. Leonardo, I want you to know you sent me a great photograph. So Leonardo and I really are good friends. And I get a photograph on my phone from Leonardo at the Phillips because they love Leonardo's work too. And he emails me, Leonardo owns a beautiful sky and water painting of mine, and he's in the vault of the Phillips. And he goes, hey, another painting of yours in the connection. Oh, there. You're moving right over there.
Yeah, it's right here. Can you see it?
There it is. Yay! I love that sky and water. If you were in my house, you'd see a Leonardo Drew there. That's a sky and water painting of mine. But you sent me this great link from the Phillips of you seeing the paintings of mine in storage. And
that's right.
I think that's,
yes.
And every artist, and I know Leonardo and I share that. Whenever you go to a museum, you always want to get into the storage room to see what's there. So anyway, that's great. Yeah. Anyway, I thank you so much. I want to say a shout out to Ariel HaKohen, who will be the last artist we see. He's also the youngest artist. And I wanted to say that I know everyone who I'm interviewing for over, I think, more than 30 years. But Ariel is younger than 30, but I know him for over half of his life. So he's studying, Leonardo, you would love his work. He's studying in London now. So do you want to say anything now for a minute, Ariel, since you're a guest today, you're not a participant? You have to unmute.
Yeah, I'm on my last percentages of battery, but I just want to say, I'd like to write every sentence that was said today. It was really inspiring, and I think you were so generous with sharing like the process, your mind behind the work. So thanks so much.
Aria, are you in London?
Yeah, I'm now in London.
Okay, go to the Tate and send us a photograph of the Louis Nevels and the other, because I have not seen it. I've been told that it's there. So get that photograph and send it back to us.
I'll do that. I'll do that. My word.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll get it to him. He's in his graduate school and he's on full scholarship, Leonardo. You'd love this.
Oh,
tell them where
fantastic.
you're in school. Tell them where you're in school.
I'm at the Royal College of Art, and on June is the graduation exhibition. So it's like the last month of a bit crazy, but also great fun. So.
Oh boy. Yeah, go get them, baby.
So God be with all of you, Leonardo. Thanks again. You're one in a million. I feel so lucky to know you.
My pleasure.
I want to have a few clapping. Wait, get off of your quiet. I want no, not quite like that. I want to hear it. Let's have a little clapping for Leonardo.
Too much. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you so much. Look at that. You'll see all those clapping.
Oh.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in our next sessions. And thank you again, Tobi and Leonardo.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good day and good evening.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.